What really happened? Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, July 11th, 2016, almost getting into the middle of the month here, July. It's actually snowing in Wyoming right now. Jackson Hole, as a matter of fact. So take that, Al Gore. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Dan is in our control room, but Mike's going to be taking over here in just a couple of minutes to answer the phones when you call on in. A couple of quick program notes here. Tomorrow, Dean Arnold will be our third-hour guest. He's got a new book out about Hillary and Vince, obviously being Hillary Clinton and Vince Foster. Wednesday, we're going to have Dave Gahary and Phil Turney. These the producers, funders, whatever. They're trying to put together a new movie on Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. So getting into the news here, and there's a lot of really ugly stuff going on here. Somebody is really trying to kick off mass riots, the Summer of Chaos, whatever the code name is for it. There's apparently another shooting up in the Berrien Courthouse up in Michigan. 3 people dead. One is the shooter. The other 2 are bailiffs. No other details at this present moment. But it's just spinning out of control here, and there are too many people who would see race riots and protests all across the country as being to their political advantage here. Now then, as you know, the protests are continuing over the police killings of these individuals, and it's really being fanned up by the media, which is pushing race, which is nonsense. The problem is not race, the problem is police brutality. And we are all targets, regardless of skin color, because the police have been trained by these Israeli security companies. They're hopped up on prescription psychiatric medication. They've been told they will not be prosecuted for anything that they do. They're basically engaging in criminal behavior. They're stealing more from the American people with civil forfeiture than the burglars and muggers and robbers all put together. And the police are murdering more innocent Americans than all the mass shooters and terrorists put together. That is the reality of the situation. And I'm not the only person out there saying that. There's an article over in Reader-Supported News saying, I blame the police. And that's exactly right. Because the police created this decision by forgetting that they are supposed to be working for the ordinary people, the law-abiding citizens. And it has been spiraling out of control. The shootings, the violence, the tasings, the civil forfeiture, all of it. It's just been totally out of control. And obviously the powers that be are trying to build sympathy for the police, but that's a really, really hard sell right now. Most Americans do not have a positive image of the police forces. Now, in one way, Claire and I are lucky to be living in Hawaii. We don't have these problems here. Everybody's a minority. It's all just a whole bunch of different people working together, getting along just fine. Our Honolulu Police Department are very mellow, very low-key. You don't see those kinds of problems here. And the reality is, even the corporate media is starting to come on out and say this is not racial bias. The New York Times ran a story where analysts went through and studied the shootings between 2000 and 2015 and basically found out police officers were more likely to fire their weapons without having first been attacked when the suspects were white. Because of all the negative publicity over killing black people, the police hesitate now. But they don't hesitate with the white suspects because the media will not report it when the police gun down an innocent white person. So it's not a racial issue. In fact, it actually goes the other way. You're less likely to be shot by the police if you are black. And the reality is that police shootings of black men in the U.S. are down from around 100 a year in the 1960s to 35 a year these days. And when you take into account the fact that America's black population has doubled, then on a per capita basis, police shootings of black men have dropped 80% since the 1960s. There is no crisis. It's being fanned up out of thin air, like the 1990s rape hysteria, to turn us against each other, to divide us. Now, the official story is already beginning to fall apart. KARE-TV got hold of the police scanner audio from the stop of Philando Castile, and it blows the official story to bits. The official story is they were stopped just for a broken taillight. No. Castile was pulled over because he matched the description of a wanted suspect in an armed robbery, and that's why he was pulled over and why the police were on guard. Now, the second lie that came on out was that the police did not call for medical attention after Castile was shot. The police radio audio confirms, yes, they did. They called for medical assistance immediately. Now, the official story was that Castile's background with law enforcement was limited to driving without insurance citations. That's not true. Castile had many run-ins with the police. He was stopped over 50 times since 2002 for numerous violations. He'd run up something like $6,500 in traffic fines. Now, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network right now, and we're talking about the reality behind this media hysteria that this is all about racism and white police officers preferentially shooting black people, but the numbers don't support that. The police have actually killed almost twice as many innocent white people as black people. Now, the Minnesota police officer who shot Castile, his lawyer is out there saying it had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with the presence of a gun on somebody who was thought to be a suspect in an armed robbery. This guy is not the innocent, sweet victim he's being portrayed. It's just like the embarrassment with Alton Sterling, who was being held up as, oh, this just innocent man gunned down in the streets. No, he wasn't. He had a really long rap sheet. Battery, assault, drug, weapons charges, deadbeat dad, and a pedophile. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Bob in Indiana, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I was wondering, I had a question. Would you believe that an honest inventory was taken on all levels of the parking structure in Dallas there, the brass? How much brass was left to tell who's shooting and how many are shooting?
Yes. What was the result?
Well, I don't know.
I guess they haven't released that information yet, but they're already trying to pull back and say that the patsy who was blown up with the bomb, that he didn't have that antique SKS rifle. And they've got the appropriate picture of something that looks like an AR-15. They're trying to repair the story because it's falling apart. And that picture of the gun has come up. I mean, it absolutely fits the bill of the gun grabbers. High-capacity magazine, forward grip, rails on the barrel house of the foregrip and all that stuff. But that is not the gun that he was reportedly found with originally. They're trying to change the story.
Well, I see some parallels in the Dallas shooting with the San Bernardino shooting.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the witnesses in Dallas said they heard gunfire coming from multiple directions. And listening to the audio that was put out by WikiLeaks, the rate of fire is not automatic, but it's certainly not consistent with this antique gas-operated battle rifle from World War II that had a permanent 10-round magazine. You couldn't replace the magazine unless you did some heavy modifications to it. And you're hearing 20, 30 shots going off in a single stream. It just doesn't line up.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, apparently there was an incident over the weekend where there was this off-duty St. Louis County police officer, and an intruder threw a concrete block through the window and tried to enter the house, and the off-duty officer shot him. And apparently the family is now saying this was due to an online argument about Black Lives Matter, but apparently the young man in question was known to have mental health issues, so once again we've got to be looking at the prescription antidepressant factor in all of this violence. Now, over at youngcons.com, there was an article written by a black police officer directed at Black Lives Matter and saying, look, you have got to understand there are some realities you're trying to pretend. When you have a city where the majority of the citizens are black, such as Baltimore, you're always going to have more black people getting arrested. It's called demographics. And we do know that there's a lot of crime being committed. And it's not racist to point it out, especially when you're trying to correct the media misperception. Now, over in Atlanta, they found a black man hanging from a tree in a park. Immediately, everybody said, oh, the lynchings have returned, the lynchings have returned. But according to police and the city's mayor, they're saying this was a suicide, no question about it. But everybody's primed to want to see racism and race hate and just pump this thing as hard as they can. Rudy Giuliani came on out with the fact everybody needs to remember. Black kids are not really in danger from white police officers. 99 times out of 100, black kids who are killed are being killed by other black kids. Driven by poverty, the influx of drugs. And remember, when that whole drug smuggling scandal broke, Gary Webb and Dark Alliance, they found out that the cocaine being smuggled into this country by the CIA was being deliberately dumped on the black neighborhoods to keep them poor, to keep them under control. They did the same thing during Vietnam when they were smuggling heroin back to the United States. They sold it specifically into the black neighborhoods. Now, Obama is out there saying that gun control is necessary if you care about the safety of our police officers. The problem with that one is the police don't seem concerned about the safety of innocent civilians. And again, I'm going to go back to that shooting they had at the Empire State Building in New York. 9 bystanders shot, all by the New York Police Department. Safety has to be a two-way street. Respect has to be a two-way street. And I want to remind everybody that the United States Supreme Court ruled in John Bad Elk versus United States that if the police are acting outside the letter of the law and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, citizens have a legal right to defend themselves up to and including the use of lethal force. So here's the deal. Message from me to all the law enforcement officers out there. When you are in compliance with the law and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you will have my full, polite, respectful cooperation. If you start acting like Hillary Clinton and the laws don't apply to you, there's going to be a little bit of friction. And that's just the way it's going to be. This is not a race problem. It's an out-of-control police problem. And everybody's pumping this for their own political agenda. Down in Dallas, the mayor of Dallas, Mike Rawlings, actually came on out and said the reason for these 5 policemen being killed was slavery. Well, Mr. Rawlings, I hate to burst your little political bubble, but slavery ended back in the 1860s. None of those police officers were ever slave owners. None of those protesters were ever slaves, other than to the degree that we are all slaves to that 1040 form. So it's a bit of a reach to say this has to do with slavery. It's like Israel trying to keep the Holocaust current news for political gain. Rawlings is trying to bring slavery back up for political gain. And we're sick and tired of hearing about it. Slavery is gone. I was never a slave owner. I refuse to be tarnished as one. In fact, my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad helping escaped slaves get to Canada. So stop screaming that we're all racist and we're all slave owners. It's an unfair generalization. Now, the new Black Panthers, not to be confused with the old Black Panthers, the new ones, the new and improved, are out there with a solution. They want to break off 5 southern states of the United States and make them for blacks only. All the white people there are going to have to live, and they're going to break off and be a separate nation. Bring back the Confederacy. That doesn't sound like a workable solution, but if your goal is to try and create a civil war, to justify a national emergency and declaration of martial law, that's a good way to go about it. And I'm not the only person who's out there saying this is what's going on. Investment Watch blog. Globalists are pitting blacks against whites in America to incite a bloody race war. And here's how we can all win together by refusing to be manipulated into hatred and rage. And Black Lives Matter may have gone a little too far. They're not getting as much traction as they wanted. I mean, remember when they were out there with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, and the media was saying, oh, if Zimmerman's acquitted, there's going to be race riots all across the country. And it didn't happen. Because black people and white people understood that's what the government wanted. And now they're pushing even harder than they did before, because they're stuck. They don't know what else to do. But there's an interesting article over in heatstreet.com basically saying the violent, over-the-top attitude of Black Lives Matter is alienating all their supporters, even within the hardcore liberal establishment. Because Black Lives Matter isn't talking about racial justice. They're talking about reverse discrimination. And you don't cure racism by being racist. You don't. Now, over at conservativeoutfitters.com, they ran a poll, online poll. Do you consider Black Lives Matter to be a radical hate group? 97% said yes. Their job is to create this crisis, and it's certainly having an international effect. 3 countries have now issued travel warnings to their own citizens about coming to the United States. And let's see, Bahrain is saying be very, very careful about coming here. Where else? Let's see. I didn't get the. I think Bahamas is another one. So our tourism industry is going to take a major, major hit because of all this manufactured violence, and it is manufactured. Story coming out, actually a YouTube video of the Dallas sniper attack as a diversion from Hillary's email scandal, where Director Comey came on out and said, yes, she did it. We're not going to charge her, but we admit she did it. She had all these felony violations of Title 18. Another article in State of the Nation. Obama does Dallas to distract from Comey debacle. Everybody now understands how the government plays these games. So we did a couple of flashbacks here because it's important for you to understand what's really going on. Back in the 1960s, the American people were becoming very united in their anger at the policies of the U.S. federal government, mostly the war in Vietnam, and the realization that Richard Nixon was a crook. And so in order to blunt the public outrage, to redirect it, Richard Nixon turned to divide and conquer tactics among the American people, and he used the FBI's COINTELPRO program to split Americans into groups and trick them into hating each other so that they would forget they hated the government. One of the things they did, and I was actually there, was they staged a hippie riot takeover at the Disneyland theme park in Anaheim. And it discredited the anti-war movement, allowing Vietnam to continue for an additional 2 years. And that was an undercover FBI operation. When the whistle was blown on COINTELPRO in the 1970s, it came out. The FBI has informants on every college campus in America, and they still do to this very day. So that smelly kid with the dynamite, that's your undercover informant. And they literally organized what was supposed to be a peaceful protest and then immediately turned it violent. And the media had a field day saying, oh, these so-called peaceniks, they're beating up on Mickey Mouse. And it was all done to split the hippies from everybody else. And that wasn't the only split they were working on. Native Americans, that whole Leonard Peltier thing, the early feminists. And when we come on back, I'll tell you what they did to increase, to deliberately foment race hatred in America. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're taking a look back at history to the 1960s and the FBI's COINTELPRO program, which basically was a campaign of dirty tricks to crush legitimate dissent. And in order to distract the American people from what was going on in Washington, D.C., they deliberately fomented divides and hate and anger among the population to get them squabbling with each other and ignoring what the government was doing. And the civil rights movement was a major, major target because Dr. Martin Luther King was not only a pacifist and opposed to war, but he was calling attention to the fact that the Vietnam draft preferentially was putting black people out on those front lines as bullet catchers. So one of the things the FBI did is they decided to infiltrate the original Black Panthers. Now, when the Black Panthers first started up, they were also a pacifist group. Their agendas were making sure school kids in the ghettos had good breakfasts before they went to school, and they wanted local control of the school curriculum. But over time, as the FBI infiltrated more informants, they took the group militant in order to turn them into something that would terrorize the American people into just automatically being afraid of the black people. And one of the slimiest, dirtiest tricks they did was called the Black Panther Coloring Book. And this Black Panther coloring book, it wasn't even really a good coloring book. It was just a bunch of sketches put together, and it was mailed to households all across America. We even got one where I was living in West Covina, which made no sense whatsoever. But we were all very naive and trusting, and when the TV told us this was from the Black Panthers, everybody pretty much bought it. And it was filled with all of these absolutely hateful, racist illustrations, and even then, back in the 1960s, in the Black Panther coloring book, the FBI was trying to encourage black people to kill white police officers. It's right there in the illustrations. You can see that. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? All I could say is, it was the other way around. I know the U.S. government would not waste no time using the Patriot Act against these people if they were calling out killing black people. But now, since it's the opposite direction, I don't think it's a protest. But the other way around, it'd be considered probably a violation of the Patriot Act, using coercive means for political gain, using the act of terror.
Yes. They're trying to divide us against each other. The last thing Washington, D.C. wants is racial harmony and friendship and fairness in our population, because then we're going to be looking at what the government is doing. It's like when the Soviet Union collapsed and they didn't have the communists to wag at us anymore, and people started saying, okay, time for a peace dividend. We want you to take our tax money and spend it on this country. And so here we have the government trying to cook up a new Cold War, if not a hot war, so they can go on taking our money and the lives of our children for their dreams of glory.
Well, like I said, my kids are registering for selective service. I found it's not the law; it's an executive order that makes people sign up for selective service.
Well,
that it's not the law.
No, it is.
It's an executive order,
which I don't think is legally binding under the terms of the Constitution, but we have a government that is basically ignoring the Constitution. They've gone off the constitutional reservation, and they think you should just nod and stay obediently silent and go along with this destruction of our nation. And you know something? It is a slap in the face of every military person in U.S. history who laid down their life to preserve, protect, and defend that Constitution. And now to see our current Washington, D.C. literally peeing on it, trying to get rid of the amendments, trying to get rid of the Bill of Rights, it's a slap in the face to everybody who ever served in the U.S. military for the last 200-plus years. It really is.
Well, Mike, you think you could try to get this? You heard of Larry Pygmy, former Black Panther?
Yeah. Actually, I've had him on the show once.
Well, you think you'd probably bring him back up again?
I'll see if I can hunt him down. I'll see if I can hunt him down, yes.
Yes, all right, Mike. Have a good day. I'll let you. I know break's coming up.
Yeah, the break's coming up. Thank you very much. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take this next phone call, I have a message for all of you out there on either side of these protests. You are being used by the very government you think you are protesting against. Go back and study the history of COINTELPRO. Go back and study the history of the Black Panther coloring book. This is how the government keeps you under control. Dividing us against each other, building anger against each other, so that we cannot unite in opposition to the government's policies of war and taxation and empire. And they use undercover informants to cause a ruckus. So anyone out there who's encouraging violence is either an undercover agent of some kind, or they're a useful idiot. Take your pick. But when you're out there encouraging violence, you're doing exactly what the U.S. government wants you to do. And then I want you to look back at all those countries where the U.S. went in, created civil unrest to bring down a democratically elected government and replace it with an unaccountable ruling dictatorship. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973, Kiev in 2014. The list goes on and on and on, and there is no rule that says they can't do exactly the same thing in this country. And we've been hearing all these comments about getting rid of the Constitution, it's outdated, getting rid of the Bill of Rights, we suffer from too much democracy. And Washington, D.C. is absolutely terrified out of their minds that the American people are realizing what's going on. So this is a call to Rivero's Rangers to get these messages out on social media. The graphics that we've produced, I'll repost them to the top of the page so that you can copy them off. But we need to get the word of calm cooperation out there. The enemy of the black people is not the white people, it's Washington, D.C. The enemy of the white people isn't the black people, it's Washington, D.C., and we need to remember that. Okay, let's take a phone call. Brian in Chile, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Greetings from the Constitutional Republic of Chile. How's my Skype coming in? Is it coming in loud and clear?
Absolutely. It's clear as a bell. You sound like you're next door.
Oh, great. Okay. I wanted to chime in a little bit on this business of these shootings in Minneapolis and Baton Rouge and Dallas. And I want to play devil's advocate if I could here. And I hope you don't think I'm too much of a monster for suggesting this, but maybe this whole incident and this whole series of incidents is a good thing. And let me explain why. Now, we've got this middle class that's being eroded tremendously. It's being reduced to almost nothing. And it's being reduced on the underside by this class of, what I call orcs, if I can borrow a theme from Tolkien. The underclass who robs the middle class by taking EBT, food stamps, all sorts of types of government benefits, filling our prisons, and just robbing us blind with guns in our face. Now that's on the underside of the middle class. Then you go on the upper side of it, and you've got the political class that's doing the same thing. And between these two, the middle class is sandwiched in, and it's being just driven down to nothing. And the enforcement arm of the political class, of course, are the police. So now what you have here basically are two gangs, the police on one side and the BLM people on the other side. Two gangs that are fighting each other for the turf ground of the middle class. So if they want to go to war with each other and kill each other, hey, maybe that's a good thing.
No, because that's called a civil war.
That comment on you.
That's called a civil war, and I'd like to avoid that. But again, at this point, especially after the exposure of what Hillary's been doing, the Clinton Foundation, Comey giving her a get-out-of-jail-free card, the Washington, D.C. has lost all credibility. They've lost the trust and confidence of the American people. They understand it's only going to be a matter of time before they collapse like the former Soviet Union unless they can find a way to transition the United States into a country where the people have absolutely nothing to say about how the country is being run. A neo-feudalist society, if you will. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is they need to manufacture a crisis that justifies the temporary, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, suspension of all of our civil liberties. like Adolf Hitler's enabling acts, which were only supposed to be a temporary measure and turned out to be permanent.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It seems to me that maybe the best thing that could happen would be maybe a civil war. Because that would give us our opportunity to reestablish our own government, too, and secure our own guards to best ensure the safety and happiness of the future. So I don't know. I don't see the inevitability of a civil war in the United States is just written in stone to me. I just don't see any other way out of it.
Well, my recommendation is we can clearly see indications that our Ponzi economics scheme is on the edge of collapse. The federal government has destroyed its own credibility. The parallels between now and the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, are very, very obvious to me. And I would like to see a way for this transition to happen in favor of the American people and the rights of ordinary citizens, and in a way where there's very little bloodshed lost. I have accepted the fact that my approach may be a complete and utter failure. I'm hearing so many people talking about revolution and violence. It may happen because this push to create a single global government with a single global private central bank has apparently created the political climate that could support a global revolution, and it looks like it may be starting in France.
Well, we can only hope so. But I can see, the United States is the only thing that's really standing between these globalists from establishing world government and not. The only thing that's really stopping it is the American people right now, and the fact that they're armed. And I'm afraid that's what it's going to have to come down to, because these globalists, they're not going to stop at anything to get what they want.
Yeah, but history has a pattern of would-be tyrants and rulers who make a miscalculation and they take one step too far, and then the people rise up against them. Ceausescu, Mussolini, Louis XVI, Charles I. Rulers are not perfect. They make mistakes, and sometimes they make mistakes they cannot recover from. And Washington, D.C. is running out of viable options, and unfortunately they're feeling cornered, and cornered animals are their most dangerous. But the globalists want the U.S. military to enforce their rule over China and Russia. But a revolution in this country, maybe one of the reasons Obama is flooding this country with all these refugees is to have a replacement population if they decide that the American people are just too difficult to control, and let's get them to kill each other off, and the United States will be just handed over to the illegal immigrants and refugees, and real Americans will become an endangered species.
Well, we already are an endangered species that I can see. Yeah. Well, okay, Mike, thanks for taking my call. We'll talk again sometime.
All right, we certainly will. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on to Hillary Clinton, her email server, the FBI get-out-of-jail-free card, for lack of anything else. It wasn't a cover-up. Comey got out there and said, yeah, she did it. Felony violations. There it is. Story coming out of WorldNet Daily. Comey has a long history of cases ending favorably for the Clintons. So, there's a long track record. And we know that James Comey overlaps with Loretta Lynch at that HSBC money laundering cover-up. And HSBC overlaps with the Clinton Foundation. It's all tangled together by all that illicit capital flowing through our political system. It's become totally, totally corrupted. Now, Op-Ed News had an interesting little article. Does FBI Director Comey really think Hillary Clinton is above the law? Because he certainly acted like it. And the FBI is protecting the Clintons here. But we're in a serious, serious situation where we're looking at the possible collapse of the entire country. So, I have a message for the FBI, and I know you're listening to this show. Did you ever stop to think that if you'd actually done your job properly back when Vincent Foster was murdered, that the nation would not be in the mess it's in today? That's something you might properly take a moment to consider. Because all that has happened, the destruction of our nation, you share the blame for having let it get out of control in the first place. Actually, if you want the blame, goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan's Attorney General, William French Smith, who changed the rules to allow the CIA to get involved with drug smuggling and not report them to the DEA. The CIA got their license to smuggle back in the Reagan administration, and they have been using that amazing amount of money ever since to reshape the nation to whatever it is they think it ought to be. And democracy doesn't seem to have a place in there at all. Now, apparently, I'm being told by our control room, Larry Pinckney is going to be on Joyce Riley's show on Wednesday. So if you want to hear what he's got to say about it, going to be on that show on Wednesday. All right, let's grab a couple of phone calls. Jerry in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael, for taking my call. Aloha to you, too. You know, 2 callers ago, you had a caller call in, and he had mentioned that, you know, this Black Lives Matter is a protest versus, you know, when we stand up and say something, you know, we're being mean and not right, and the government's got to put more controls and more sanctions on us as individuals.
Especially if you say something critical of the government of Israel. But yeah, I mean, there's a clear bias. Black Lives Matter is out there. We even saw it, you know, in Baltimore and in these other places when they were rioting and destroying property. Oh, it's a First Amendment protected expression of their upset here. But again, if anybody else, if any of the non-protected, non-politically blessed minorities go on out and do something, yeah, you get arrested, you get tased, you get beat up.
Well, you know, the other word that comes to mind is when a political person causes a crime or is indicted of a crime or suspected of a crime, they call it a scandal. But I don't know about, you know, if you were to get caught driving without a license plate or your seatbelt on, that's a crime.
Yes.
That's not a scandal.
Well, you're right. Scandal is a word that is used to psychologically blunt what has happened by implying that maybe it isn't real, it's, you know, I mean, and Hillary's been screaming throughout her entire career. Every time there's an accusation of wrongdoing, oh, it's part of the vast right-wing conspiracy. There's this vast right-wing conspiracy. They hate the Clintons, they hate women, they hate this, they hate that. And it's a way of trying to basically evade the issue and not say anything that could come back in a perjury charge down the road, which, by the way, may be in the offing for Hillary Clinton, because she was under oath last October when she testified about her email server before Congress, and Congress has now issued the FBI a referral based on the findings of the investigation proving that Hillary lied. And that puts Director Comey in a real tight corner, because he can't very well come back and say the FBI lied about what Hillary had been saying and doing without destroying that entire agency. So, game, set, and match to Trey Gowdy as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, I agree. I think Trey Gowdy is doing a great job, and I hope he pursues it a little bit further or all the way. But, you know, the other thing I wanted to mention, too, is since this Dallas shooting, and take us our minds off of Hillary and Comey, I don't know if you remember back about 5 years ago, maybe 4, the Lance Armstrong doping incident when Hillary was on the hot seat answering questions about Benghazi.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they just hammered him. That was the important story. Or Inflategate. The football wasn't inflated properly. And this is all manufactured news and distraction, because the job of the corporate media is just like that of a magician. You got to look over here when you're not supposed to be looking over there.
Well, you hit it right on the head. Thank you for taking my call. Have a blessed day.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I've been listening avidly to your last couple of callers. And I would say that, I know I've mentioned it before, the people that I love most in the world are black. My wife is black. My daughter is mixed. And my wife is an educated, pretty elevated bureaucrat within the city government of LA. She's got a pretty big job. And there's an endemic trust of the government in the black community. I do not know why, but they will, even with, you know, the horrible stuff that's gone under in Obama and then, Loretta Lynch, and before her the other guy, but they seem to ignore, for instance, like things like the Tuskegee experiments and the Black Panther thing, where every other person was an infiltrator, and the government was assassinating them in their sleep. And by the way, do you remember, Mike? They had a couple of years ago. They had a guy who was a prominent Panther, who was the only Asian or one of the only Asians in the Panther movement, and it turned out, and he was venerated in the Bay Area for being this civil rights kind of Panther hero. And it turns out that this guy, he was their armorer. He was their armorer for the Panther Party. He himself was an informer and turned in all these people, and they were trying to get him, just like they tried to get these guys now to do Terrorist Act, they tried to get them to do Terrorist Act too, so they could come down. And when they didn't do it, they went and assassinated him even in their sleep. But then you look at Freeway Ricky Ross and the dumping of tons of cocaine. I mean, there's so much that has been done, and yet they retain this trust in the government.
I don't know that it's trust here.
One more thing, Mike. One guy, a couple things back, described the police force as being the repressive tool of the 1%, and no matter what, no matter how much they foment BLM and all these people into violence, in the end, the 1% is going to back their protectors. And they're not going to let those guys go down, and they're going to let them have open season. And they're just being used.
Yeah, they are. They're all being used by that. And unfortunately, when you have people who are dependent on food stamps and various other social support, they will just come to view the person who's handing that stuff out. They have to be good, or I'm bad for accepting their largesse. That's why the government wants us dependent on them all the time. That's how government rules. They take your money away, then they give it back as long as you do what you're told. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we've got a caller in Dallas I don't have a name for, but it's on line 4. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello? You're on the air. Yes.
Hello. Hey, Michael. I was actually calling about Comey. It appears that he was in charge of money laundering from the Sinaloa cartel and the others while he was at HSBC. That would be one thing. Also, I sent you a video called Dallas Hollywood, a massacreful theatrical performance. In this video, you'll see all the effects going off with the guns hitting and whatnot. Then it shows the character running around the corner after he gets done while he's changing his clothes right in front of police and everybody else that was in the location. Anyway, I did like a video forensic of it, and I sent it to you. So hopefully you'll get a chance to check that out. It's pretty interesting. I
do see it in my inbox. I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I won't until after the show is over. But thank you very much for the information, okay?
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
All right, we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, no aloha.
Aloha, nui, nui, nui.
Okay, now you got me. Well, I'll give you my secondary thought first and my main thought afterwards. Should anybody really expect any differently of Hillary, Comey, and Lynch to start off with all that fiasco to begin with? How could anybody expect differently of that outcome? Now, as to the main thought, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier in talking about how the federal government or alphabet soup agencies end up using getting people to fight against each other using sex, religion, and financial background against each other. Not to mention their ethnic background. Let's not forget that. So use all of those against people, against themselves. People are basically fighting against themselves, and it's like, come on, people, you don't see what you're doing. You're falling for what the government's trying to pull over your eyes.
You know, it's like somebody who deliberately puts two Siamese fighting fish together to watch them rip each other up, and they think that's funny. They kick over an anthill. That's the kind of mindset there. But you had one.
Like a piranha.
You had one divide in there that they aren't using, and that's the wealth inequality, because that's the one they don't want the American people thinking about. They want them thinking about, which bathroom to use, and, what color is the skin, and what the religion is, and they're doing everything they can to stop the American people from thinking about the fact how this nation has been plundered and looted, and all of that wealth is now piled up at the very, very tippy top of our social economic order, where it is of absolutely no use whatsoever to the economy as a whole.
Well, for the everyday person on the street, that's true. They have no clue or whatever, no matter what you try to do to show them or tell them. But for the other folks that's here in the U.S. that are awake of what's going on and see what's going on, it's like, okay, we're just basically, at least some of us, are waiting for the bottom to fall out and just start all over again.
I agree. I have to let you go. We got to take our top of the hour station break. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the phones. We've got a lot of callers today. Matt in Montana. Aloha. Welcome. Sorry, that's Missouri. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm a little late to the show today. 2 points I wanted to hit on. Number one, as far as the SKS rifle goes, there is a variant that came into the States, limited quantity, that does accept detachable 30-round AK magazines, and you can pop that 10-round internal mag out and replace it with an aftermarket 30-round mag without any tools. It's pretty easy. I don't have any reason to believe that Dallas wasn't a false flag, but if it was, somebody has to ask why Dallas. And a video I caught on YouTube this morning showed 2 news stations doing reports on July 5th that the Dallas PD was going through a mass exodus. They had cops quitting left, right, and center, as many as 48 a month, and they were looking at being 200 officers short in the very near future. Somebody has to ask, why was the DPD in that big of trouble, and why were cops quitting that heavy?
Well, we've got that big stink up in Oakland that's now involved, I think, 3 different police departments who were all having sex with this underage prostitute. And if you really think about what the police have transitioned into, which is this brutalizing gang of thugs who have a license to steal from you, they have become criminal. And they're going to act like they're criminal. And I can imagine that a lot of people got into law enforcement out of a genuine sense of service to the community, are appalled by all the stuff going on with the civil forfeiture and the tasings and the beatings and the shootings, and they're probably resigning like heck and saying, I'm going to go do something else here where I can sleep at night.
Oh, I don't blame them. I mean, you can go on YouTube and there's all kinds of videos about police quitting departments over corruption. But I've never heard of a department losing 48 officers in 1 month. That's pretty close to 2 a day. And at the rate they were going, they were looking at being 200 officers short of what they needed for their complement. I think somebody needs to take a closer look at what was really going on in Dallas prior to this shooting.
Yeah, that sounds like there may have been something getting ready to blow besides the false flag attack. All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Alex in San Antonio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there?
I was calling because I'd like to see what your thoughts are on this thing, because I'm starting to put some pieces together with some information that I've been getting from people in El Salvador that kind of see what's going on and are paying close attention to the situation here, mainly because the currency that they use in El Salvador is the U.S. dollar. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to give you my take on the Clinton Foundation real quick, and then I'll take your commentary off the air.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that the email thing is just kind of like talk for the talking heads, because I think that where the meat and potatoes lie is the Clinton Foundation and all the things that may hide. And I think that the reason that they won't prosecute Hillary Clinton is because if they do, then it'll probably validate like all the things that JFK and Eisenhower had warned about, especially like the industrialization of the military. I think that, and the reason I say this is because I was told that this is probably one of the reasons why the CIA last week began to discuss chemtrails and weather modification, to kind of either
they're trying to lure people away. Yeah, they're muddying the waters. They're trying to poison the well. They're trying to make the independent media look like a bunch of nutcases because we're
hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're desperate to find some way to destroy the credibility of the independent media. They can't rebuild the credibility of the corporate media. It's been absolutely destroyed along with that of the government itself. So, yeah, and my email box is being flooded with all these things about how the Earth is really flat and the Apollo moon landings were faked. And they don't know anything else to do. They're just recycling stuff that worked in the 1950s and 1960s and does not work any longer.
Well, what I'm thinking also, Mike, is that some of the things that we'll be able to will come out from an investigation and a lawsuit is how perhaps certain applications of technology have been developed by the military and then sold by the Clinton Foundation to corporate entities so that they can use this technology to either gamble on the stock market and create newer markets and dark markets, as they're called, or to wield unsuspecting power on those that may seem as a concern to their interests without anybody else being the wiser.
Well, getting on back to Occam's razor, we're looking for the simplest, most straightforward explanation, and we don't really need to waste our energies in speculating about what's lurking in the far dark corners. It is very obvious the Clinton Foundation is a slush fund. It is very obvious that it is a device for concealing wealth and not paying taxes on it. We are hearing from this supposed anonymous FBI insider informant that most of Washington, D.C. have been taking advantage of this. That's why they weren't down there in Panama with that Fonseca law firm. They didn't need to. They had one right there at hand, and everybody's tied in. It's just like they said on Watergate, follow the money, and the money all leads through that Clinton Foundation. That's the hub for everything that's been going on. And I still think it's a legitimate question to ask if Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign governments using her weak email server to deliver and that Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the payments, because roughly 40% of the acknowledged money coming into that foundation came from foreign sources. Now we're hearing from Norway that more may have been put in that is simply not being reported. Okay?
Well, here's my last question for you. Do you think that do you think that perhaps benevolent intelligence agencies are also interlocked within there, and this is a big reason why everything's kind of really slow, because they may have people entrenched in intelligence establishments such as secret societies, quasi-rogue elements, things like this, and this may take a lot of time and a lot of digging through so that the big weight doesn't fall on somebody who's innocent.
Well, at this point, we need to break the money laundry, and we'll worry about the fine details later on here, because I don't think the heads of any of the intelligence agencies are any more benevolent than James Comey has proved himself to be. I think you get to be the head of these government agencies by being just as corrupt as the people who appoint you. There may be among the rank and file individuals who've had enough, but they're risking their life if they go public.
Well, Mike,
okay?
Mike, I'm sure you would agree that someone's been keeping us alive. Someone's benevolent to say, hey, here, look, this is Agenda 21. Someone's been feeding all these whistleblowers. Something or someone out there is responsible for not just leaking this information, but putting it out into the public consciousness and proliferating it. Wouldn't you agree?
We know there are leakers. Edward Snowden, this guy at the FBI. But I don't think there's any, at this point, I don't see any centralized group that's attempting to correct things. That's why it falls on we, the American people. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go because we got a bunch of callers we need to get to. And I need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network now. We're talking about the Clinton corruption, the email server, that Clinton Foundation, which appears to be the core of everything that's been going wrong with our government for the last decade. So we're going to go to Michael in Arizona. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
All right, Mike. Hey, I've been listening to you for like over 10 years. I can't get your show on your site or RBN since the 5th. But that's not why I called. The GS4 or the G4S security company.
Yes.
That Omar worked for.
Yes.
Well, that is based out of London and Israel. No surprise.
Yes.
And Omar Mateen was actually on a documentary called The Big Fix.
Yes.
It was a BP oil spill thing.
Yes.
And well, he was on there basically. You could tell he was a paid actor because they had 4 different cameras on him. Here, that really sucks as a security guard getting all those hidden cameras on him. But he's talking down to the workers, saying it's their fault it's not getting cleaned up because they want to have the job, so they're not cleaning up on purpose. So basically, this company is the 5th down on the list of clients of Crisis Cast.
Yes.
And if you look on the clients list, and the Crisis Cast has all these things with the Royal League of Nations or something like that. It's headed up by the Queen of England there in London. They always have all these. If you look on their events,
okay, well let me respond.
BP oil is also headed up by the Queen.
Okay, now let's keep things simple and keep things focused. Yes, there are companies around the world and here in the United States of America that will provide bodies for staged political rallies or other purposes. And yes, Omar Mateen was definitely tangled up with that. And we've already pretty much covered most of this. But before I let you go, Michael, would you shoot me an email, because we went through a couple of URL changes regarding the podcast and the video and everything, and you may not have the right ones. I'm concerned that you're not able to see our show or listen to our show, and I'd like to get that sorted out. So thank you.
Yeah, I go on RBN, and they had it there for a while, but since the 5th, there's been nothing new put up on RBN's site.
Okay, well, you need to use the URL from my website because they changed the links. If you save the URL, you're on the old one. All right.
Yeah, I've never seen you under attack so bad, man. I've been listening to you for over a decade, and I've never had so much trouble getting your show because I always download it and listen to it at work the next day.
I think you're pointed at the wrong page there, Michael. Shoot me an email. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Randy in Texas. Aloha, Randy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you were talking about how hard it is for Dallas to retain officers.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you my brother-in-law happens to be a police officer. And I know that 3 or 4 months ago, when he was looking to get back into law enforcement, he had actually seen about applying at Dallas. And the thing is, their starting pay is pretty low. As a matter of fact, in the suburbs of Dallas, like Richardson, Garland, and Mesquite, the officers get paid more per year.
Well, that would be a reason for them to head for greener pastures, as it were.
Yes. But that seems to be the main reason why Dallas is losing so many officers. And another point is, I was talking to him right after the Dallas massacres, and he was talking about how his small-town police department has basically gone on high alert that anytime they're doing any sort of stop, that they're exercising caution. He's actually gone back to wearing his ballistic vest full time. And
well, you know, this whole thing about police officers being shot is going to reverse the push to demilitarize the police. Remember, the police are getting all these weapons of war, and the American people were saying that's not really needed. Well, how wonderfully convenient, because of Dallas, they're out there saying, see, you know, the police have to have MRAPs, and they've got to have missile launchers, and they've got to have all of this stuff, because the American people are declaring war on the police department. But it's actually the reverse. It's the police who declared war on the American people. And we just need to keep that sorted out, okay?
Okay, yeah, I was talking to him. I was saying, listen, you don't have to escalate things, you know. That's the worst thing that you can possibly do. And after a while, I got him to understand the point I was trying to make.
Well, you know, whoever's doing the escalating, it's because they think they're going to gain monetarily from it or politically from it. I'm a big fan of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes and the Game of Shadows, where Moriarty is going to start a war because he's in the business of selling the stuff that wars need. And that's a very real factor. That's why Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex, that if they had that much power and that much money, they would cause wars for no other reason than to sell bombs, bullets, and bandages. Okay?
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Michael.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I've been doing my part spreading your show and your website to people. And, hey, do you mind if I go a bit off topic regarding the rise of the robots? I'm really concerned about it, and I just want to put the message out for people to have some perspectives that it's really dangerous what's happening, letting automation and robots like infiltrate the workforce and our automobiles and now the police force. And I guess this actually is on topic because there's articles today about the police having robots and promoting that. And so what do you think? Is it possible that part of the overall plot here is like kill a bunch of their own police to say that you have to have robots so that the police aren't getting killed? You think that could be part of it?
Well, police robots have actually been around for quite a while, mostly for bomb disposal and surveillance. They have robots that have firearms on them. The idea that they used a bomb, and by the way, these robots are not autonomous and they're not artificially intelligent. They are remotely steered by a human officer. But it did seem like somebody wanted to establish a precedent of just bombing this suspect using the robot. And it felt fishy to me because explosives can be very imprecise. And second, you were risking structural damage to the building itself by using a bomb rather than something that connects the energy specifically to the target.
I agree with you that was intentionally going out of their way to set a precedent.
Yes.
Because there's articles, mainstream articles, saying that that is a precedent and that opens up the doorway. And they're talking about promoting like every police car to have a little robot. So in case the cop is afraid to approach a car in the middle of the night with his hand on his holster, he just sends up the robot. So they're trying to get us used to this idea that there's going to be like a robot like arresting you. And it's about the mission creep. You got to think 5-10 years down the road, we're going to have some really scary stuff going on if we don't stand up to it right now. And the way that we stand up to it now is we say no to the self-checkouts at the grocery store. We say no to the self-driving cars. We say, like, heck no to the police having robots with weapons on them. They're talking about putting tasers on a little robot and having it in each police car.
Yeah, that's pretty dangerous. And again, that's all based on a lie. This claim that tasers are non-lethal weapons, it's not true. If that shock hits your heart at the exact right point in the beat cycle, it'll put it in fibrillation and you will die. It is a lethal weapon. And now they have a lethal weapon on this robot. Now, off on a tangent, I absolutely will not use the automated checkout at any store, anywhere, simply because that means somebody lost their job. And we have got to get Americans back to working for decent wages and salaries so they can go back to pumping money into this economy in order to stave off the collapse. The quality of thinking coming out of Washington, D.C., it's appallingly bad. And it comes from everybody just looking out for their own agenda, their own privilege, their own power, their own wallet. And there's nobody maintaining a general overview or long view of the nation as a whole. And that is supposed to be the job of the president. And the last couple of presidents have abandoned that obligation. What we're hearing about Hillary is she's mentally incapable of being able to analyze the long, wide view because of her cognitive issues that are starting to surface. Anyway, listen, we need to let you go, and we've got 2 more callers waiting, but I'm going to let them wait until the next segment because we're coming up in a commercial break. Now, Gerald Salende is out there, and he's starting to use the word that I'm using. We are becoming a neo-feudal society. They're bringing back serfdom. The nobility will own everything. You will spend your life working to pay rent for the nobles leave to live your life. And that is the world that you are going to be leaving to your children to suffer in unless we're able to change the course of this nation. And I realize it's a major effort. The money junkies want to own the entire world, and they're so close to it right now, they're taking desperate gambles. Our best hope is they're going to make a really bad mistake, and we're going to see the world rise up against them. It may already be happening in France, maybe even happening over in Germany. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Michael. I wanted to address the previous caller's concern about robots.
Yes.
Just to bring it to everyone's attention about the movie Aegis, where they show that really we don't need everyone working in society. 10% of us could work if we were all willing to pitch in together and harness the world's resources at every place where they're the most prevalent, whatever it may be, and that we would have more energy than we would ever need to sustain ourselves. And that would be food and energy. But the main thing is it's a money-free society. And
well,
we can get there.
It sounds utopian, but there always has to be a medium of exchange. But you have touched on an important topic, and that is that there will be shortages that are artificially created in order to increase profits. We're always hearing about how we're running out of oil, we're running out of gas, and yet there always seems to be more of it. And latest research is showing that oil does not actually come from dead dinosaurs, that it is a continuously renewing product of deep crust microbes. Now, that doesn't mean we should go on using it as recklessly as we have, because those microbes can't keep up with us. But you'll see shortages that are deliberately manufactured by corporations and government to keep us all scrambling after them with our wallets in hand, ready to give them the last few pennies in our pockets.
That's right. We need to exit that system as soon as possible, and I would love for us all to work together to make sure that that happens soon, because if not, we're basically going back to the Mayans, just chopping our heads off on the mountainside.
Well, we're definitely going back to serfdom and feudalism, and I'm not the only person saying that. So thank you very much for the phone call. We've got time enough for Laura in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Laura, are you there?
I'm irritated how the police are treating the Black Lives Matter with kid gloves. You ought to be a Christian in front of a Planned Parenthood and see how the cops treat you. They make you keep walking. If you stop for 30 seconds, they say they'll arrest you for loitering. They spray pepper spray right into my friend's eyes. He had to go to the hospital. If your sign touches the sidewalk, they'll arrest you. They arrest young girls, underage girls, throw them in jail, and don't tell them what the charges are till the next day, but spend the night in jail. I mean, that's how we're treated as Christians, trying to save babies in front of a Planned Parenthood.
You know, you bring up a really good point, because if the real goal of Black Lives Matter was the preservation of black lives, they should be protesting Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood is killing more black people in a single day than the police do in an entire year. But that dichotomy tells you there's something else going on here.
But that's true. But the thing is, how the police are so rough with the people peacefully protesting in front of Planned Parenthood. They're very rough with you, very gruff, arrest you for anything they could think of, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Or if you're protesting against Israel, if you're supporting boycott, divestment, sanctions, if you're trying to speak at we're expecting all kinds of problems at these party conventions that's starting just 2 weeks now with the Democrats here. But you're right, the police are treating the Black Lives Matter people and the black population with kid gloves because of all the negative press. And the real numbers are that the police are murdering almost twice as many innocent white people as black people, but the media won't cover it because the goal is to turn the black and white people against each other, so we forget that all that we're suffering came about through Washington, D.C. and Wall Street's greed and lust for other people's wealth. Okay?
It's after a couple months ago, John Stadtmuller told a story in Michigan, the western side of Michigan. Young boy just a new driver, homeschool white boy. He had just dropped off a family member at basketball, church basketball, on his way between the church and his home. I don't know what happened. Nobody ever found out. Michigan State Trooper shot him.
It is. It's completely out of control, and that's why anybody who's going to try and sell us a disarmament because we have to protect our police, that's a tough sell. The police, the image of the police in this country is very, very negative, and they made it themselves. Thank you very much for the phone call, Laura. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, getting on back to our political news here. Everybody's pandering to Hillary. Everybody is convinced Hillary's going to give them what they want. And what's really kind of interesting is the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, which is opposed to Walmart because they will not unionize, has endorsed Hillary Clinton. But Hillary Clinton got a $353,000 donation to one of her pro-Hillary funds from Walmart heiress Alice Walton. So Hillary's just taking it from all sides. And she's not even concerned how she's going to reconcile the conflicting demands on her policies, because she doesn't care. She's going to do what Hillary wants to do. Now, the Sturm und Drang regarding Hillary's testimony about the server isn't open. The State Department has announced they're reopening their internal probe of the Clinton emails based on FBI Director Comey's final report that something had gone on. And remember, Comey did not clear Hillary Clinton. He did not exonerate her. He came on out and said, yes, felony violations of Title 18 occurred. I'm not recommending charges because I don't want to wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park, but it's not an exoneration of Hillary Clinton. Representative Chaffetz has referred Clinton back to the FBI for perjury based on her testimony last October under oath, which is directly contradicted by what the FBI found. So there's more of this still coming. Now, Hillary is trying to respond to Comey's allegations by saying, no, there was no carelessness whatsoever. Okay, if it wasn't carelessness, then it had to be deliberate. And she's trying to blame the State Department staffers for sending classified information to her private server. Where else would they have sent it? She wasn't using her State Department email account. Unless she had a third secure server somewhere, where else was the State Department going to send the stuff? But Hillary Clinton, according to this article that's coming out of ABC News, is standing by her claim that she did not send or receive information marked as classified. And we know that's an absolute fabrication because of the email Hillary Clinton sent to Jacob Sullivan instructing him to strip the classification markings off a document and send it by non-secure means. Now that right there is a felony violation of Title 18, Section 793. And it confirms to us Hillary was aware she was dealing with classified information. Now, a lot of people are pointing out that while FBI Director Comey may have ended the legal threat to Hillary Clinton, he's actually caused a lot more damage than good. And basically, Hillary Clinton has proven to the world, certainly to the American people, she cannot be trusted with national secrets. She put those secrets on a private email server with weaker security than the Ashley Madison website. It was not approved by anybody for her to do that. And at this point, it is inevitable the server was broken into. We know that Guccifer did it. He said he saw indications of at least 10 other intruders during that interval where they had to shut off part of the security so that her server could talk to the State Department servers. There was a hack attack that was so massive they had to shut the entire server down physically. Huma Abedin sent out a message saying, don't send anything secure to Hillary, I'll explain in person. Which tells us they knew there was something going on there that was endangering classified information. Now, another article that's come on out from WorldNet Daily is saying basically the image of Hillary Clinton that Director Comey put forward in that testimony is one of incompetence and cognitive impairment. I mean, Comey came on out and said it's entirely possible that Hillary just didn't comprehend that she was dealing with classified information. And, well, if she can't comprehend that, that's not somebody that we need to have in the White House who doesn't understand what's in front of her face. And there have been questions raised about this accident where she took a fall and smacked her skull, and that Fresnel prism in her glasses, which tells us without the glasses she is unable to focus her eyes and merge the view. She has double vision without those glasses. Now, a former Attorney General, Michael Mukasey, is saying that Hillary Clinton is disqualified from holding public office under Title 18, Section 2071, which says if you are caught, even through carelessness and neglect, exposing U.S. secrets to possible interception, you may not hold public office. And it doesn't say you have to be convicted. And Comey has already admitted this was all happening. And other people have picked up on this. Investment Watchblog. Comey just told Congress Hillary isn't smart enough to understand classified markings. We know that's a lie. But if we take it at face value, it's a strike against Hillary Clinton. Now, Brian Fisher is out there saying it's hard to believe it's only coincidence that so many close associates of the Clintons have died under strange circumstances. That's the good thing about Hillary's server and Donald Trump's comment about how fishy the death of Vince Foster was. The entirety of the Clinton scandals is now a current event. And people are going back over it. They're poring all over it. They're looking for all this stuff. And their eyes are open and they're saying, wow, has this degree of corruption really been going on right in front of us all these years, being concealed by a complicit corporate media? Now, U.S. Representative Corrine Brown, who is a Democratic superdelegate and a member of Hillary Clinton's Florida Leadership Council, has been indicted on corruption charges. And apparently was using the Clinton Foundation as a slush fund. There's another confirmation. It's not a charity, it's a slush fund. Yet another indication is the Canadian affiliate of the Clinton Foundation is spending 78% of all the money donated on administrative costs. Fancy offices, salaries, office supplies, travel, all the rest of it. To qualify in the United States as a 501c3, you have to be spending at least 51% of the money you take in on the charitable operation. And here we have the Canadian affiliate of the Clinton Foundation. They're spending nearly 80% on themselves. And the rest they'll spend out there to look good for the media so they can go on claiming it's a charitable foundation. And here's where it starts to get very, very dark, because over the weekend, a staffer with the Democratic National Committee was shot to death in Washington, D.C., was shot multiple times. Seth Conrad Rich. Now, he worked as the Voter Expansion Data Director at the Democratic National Committee. And with all of these lawsuits being filed about massive election fraud during the Democratic primaries, it is inevitable he would have been a key witness. But he just got shot in Washington, D.C. No arrests have been made. They're saying, oh, it's probably connected with some robberies in the area. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. The wet work is already beginning. And this has got to be making people who've supported Hillary loyally very, very nervous. There was no indication this guy was informing or whistleblowing or leaking. He was a loyal supporter of the Democratic National Committee, but because of what he might have known, he got gunned down in the streets. So if you're a Hillary supporter, doesn't matter how loyal you've been, doesn't matter how much you sacrificed, doesn't matter how much of her secrets you protect, when they think you're a liability, you're going to be gone. Now, somebody did a little analysis, because as you know, one of the areas where election fraud is happening are those electronic voting machines. And somebody noticed that the voting machines that seem to most heavily favor Hillary, even against the exit polls, are from companies that donated heavily to the Clinton Foundation. There's a correlation there. Now, Friday we ran a poll on the website. I didn't get to it because it was a very, very busy day. If the election were held today, who would you vote for? 98% of the respondents said Donald Trump. In the case of an honest election in this country, Donald Trump will be the next president. But we're already hearing that they are going to try and change the rules at the GOP convention to unbind all the delegates, meaning that all the primary voters are being told to go jump in a lake. What you want doesn't matter. We'll let you vote as long as you vote for the people we want. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to change the rules and say the delegates are unbound. They can vote for whoever bribes them the most or can blackmail them the most. And the GOP leadership is willing to hand the White House to Hillary Clinton rather than support the Republican candidate who has the backing of we the American people. It sounds like betrayal to me. It's a good reason to dump these two corrupt party machines, the ouster of Bernie Sanders and the potential ouster of Donald Trump. And now you know why they're fortifying and arming those convention sites. All right, let's take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Mike? Hey, Mike, you know what's going on with all these police shootings? I think they had another one today, actually, a couple in Michigan.
Those were bailiffs.
I think what's happening is you're seeing that, huh?
Those were bailiffs.
Yeah, well, they're still they're part of the sheriff's department. So what I think you're seeing now is that it's a full self-fulfilling prophecy. For years they've been saying how dangerous police work is, blah 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 blah. But it really wasn't. But now, because of their policies, because the way they're harassing people, the way they're shooting innocent people, the way they're breaking into people's homes to find a little marijuana and shooting their dogs and stuff like that, they're losing respect from the public, and this is what's happening now.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's why this attempt to say we must protect our police. The police they're trying to recast the police as the victims. Nobody's going to see them as victims. For years and years and years after police abuse and beatings and tasings and civil forfeiture, the police are not seen as the good guys by the American people. They just aren't. And all the TV shows about heroic police officers aren't going to change that.
And even when you look at, like I said, you look at the mainstream news and they're making it, police, blah, 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 that they're, building them up and everything like that. But yet, if you look online and you look at the comment section on so many websites and all that, including some of the mainstream media, you don't see that support for the police at all. It's kind of like what's going on with Russia, with Putin. They'll tell you how terrible a man Putin is and Assad is and all that. But if you look at the comments, and I'm talking about, even if you go to the comments of what I call Fox Neocon News and others, you'll see that that's just the opposite. People don't buy that stuff.
No, they're not. No, they're absolutely not. And again, the government destroyed its own credibility. The corporate media destroyed their own credibility. The police have destroyed their own credibility. The FBI destroyed their own credibility, and I have no sympathy for them. They made this situation themselves, and now their answer is, well, you don't love us anymore. We're just going to have to get tough with you now. The floggings will continue until patriotism improves.
Let's give the FBI credit. They know how to track down on ranchers and ambush ranchers on roads there in Oregon and Nevada and stuff like that. So they when it comes to stuff like that.
Ruby Ridge, they shot a woman holding an assault baby.
While she was holding her own baby there.
Yeah.
And they killed a woman. And they killed the dog first.
They killed the dogs.
Kids who tried to go to dog's defense.
I mean, again, nothing new. Forget the public image of the FBI. Forget what you see in the movies. Forget what you saw on Silence of the Lambs. Reread the history of COINTELPRO, and that tells you all you need to know about the FBI and what they're really all about. They're the American version of the Gestapo to enforce the will of the rulers on the people by hook or by crook, usually by crook.
Understand the seed they come out of, too. That's a cross-dressing pervert there, J. Edgar Hoover.
Well, do you know how much of the FBI's resources Hoover diverted to try and keep his lifestyle under wraps? But it was an open secret. Everybody knew it, but nobody dared do anything about it because of Hoover's private personal files, where he had the blackmail goods on the entire government, including President John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you see the movie, by the way?
Which one?
That Clint Eastwood directed, and he did a good job, Clint Eastwood. About, I think, Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah, it was a very, very good movie. Yes, it was.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood, even though he's a right winger, he might be, but he's a patriot.
He's a very sharp guy. He's a very sharp guy. I got to work with him on Firefox, and he was still trying to do the image of the cowboy and the cop and everything, but he's a very, very sharp gentleman.
Yeah. You see, and he still got it together today. I mean, he's still I saw the Jersey Boys. He produced that. That was excellent,
Yeah, yes, he's turned out to be a great director. Okay.
By the way, he was in a cameo role in Jersey Boys. You know what that was?
No.
Remember that part? They were in a hotel room.
I didn't see that movie. I didn't see that film.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
How did you see it?
Yeah, well, don't spoil it for me. Don't spoil it for me. Rosebud is the name of the sled. All right, listen, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to try and start with Joe in Pennsylvania. I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Hey, Michael, it's nice. I just want to say that I support your message, and thanks for what you do. And I just wanted to ask you what you thought is next in store, because now that Hillary is out in the public eye again, what type of event do you think is coming next? I mean, they already killed, five cops in Dallas, 6 cops in Dallas. What's happening next to keep us distracted and fighting amongst each other to keep us off the money junkies and the politicians?
Well, they're obviously still trying to kick up the. They're still trying to kick up the race riots. The other situation may be they're also desperate to start a war with Russia and China. We may see a monumental false flag in the hope that we'll forget all about the crimes and corruption and rally behind the flag and get those gosh darn Ruskies. Washington, D.C. is in a panic. They're desperate, and that is a bad situation. We'll be right back. Thank you for the call, Joe. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, turning over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Apparently, the Syrian army has succeeded in cutting off the militant supply line to Aleppo. That's a significant victory. Now, apparently, last week, some of these Islamic State militants, the moderates, shot down a Russian military helicopter near Palmyra, killing 2 Russian pilots on board. And here is where it starts to get a little bit ugly, because examination of the remains shows that these militants used an American-made weapon, a TOW heavy anti-tank missile, to kill this helicopter. So now American weapons are being used to kill Russians. That is a dangerous, dangerous provocation and escalation. Meanwhile, down in Yemen, in their capital city, an American-made cluster bomb was dropped by Saudi Arabia into a residential area. That is, needless to say, a war crime by anybody's definition. Getting on back to Syria. German and Canadian troops have entered Syria. They've arrived at the city in northern Syria, Tel Abijad, in the northern province of Cancer. And here is the thing you need to understand. Canada and Germany have effectively just invaded Syria with a ground force, because they are not there at the request of or with the permission of Syria's legitimate government. Still trying to get Assad out. Willing to risk a nuclear world war over money is really what it's all about. Story coming on out here, Investment Watch blog, U.S. and NATO prepare for war with Russia. Putin declares war with the United States is inevitable if Hillary Clinton wins. And he's absolutely right. Look at Hillary's career in the State Department. The bombs were falling, the drones were flying, people were being blown to bloody bits all over the place. She voted for the Iraq War. She never met a war she didn't love. As long as somebody else's kids were dying in it, somebody else's were paying for it. Now, Paul Craig Roberts has come out with an observation that Vladimir Putin is the only leader the West has. And he's right about that. Putin continues to demonstrate he's a global statesman. He's trying to calm this situation down in the face of a United States and NATO, which have gotten themselves into an economic mess and think a world war is their best chance to get out of it, or at least to distract the public from it, because that's a repeating pattern. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, I've lost count of the number of countries the U.S. has attacked, drone struck, or overthrown since then. Somewhere 17, 18, something like that we know of. NATO and U.S. are massing arms and people along Russia's borders and all the time screaming about Russia's aggressing, Russia's aggressing. No, Russia is not the aggressor until we see Russian troops on the north side of the border with Canada or the south side of the border with Mexico. Russia is not the aggressor here. We all know who is. Will be. Right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The Pentagon is sending even more troops to Iraq. It has turned into a quagmire. And the U.S. is bogged down in Iraq. They're bogged down in Afghanistan. They're bogged down in Yemen. They're bogged down in Libya. They can't even get started in Syria, let alone get ready to attack Iran. And by the way, Hillary Clinton has come on out and said, if she's president, she will declare war on Iran. Because after all, that's what her backers in Tel Aviv want. So get ready to kiss your sons and daughters goodbye, because they're going to go off and fight Israel's wars for them. Alrighty, moving on here. Now, NATO's come out with a rather interesting comment. The new realities make the Internet a potential front line in conflict. In other words, the Internet is going to be a battleground. Because no war is fought without massive amounts of propaganda. And the NATO leadership and the U.S. leadership are waking up to the reality that the Internet and the independent media have taken away from them the ability to lie to their people with impunity. And they're panicking about that. Because that is what the samizdat did to the old Soviet Union, which led to their collapse. People stopped believing and trusting what the government was saying. And so they're trying to couch it that the Internet is where the war will be between the good guys and the bad guys. But what they're really talking about is the war for the minds of the people is being fought here on the Internet. The corporate media has become a dinosaur. Nobody's paying attention to them anymore. Polls consistently show people do not trust the corporate media. They'll tune in to see the really gorgeous babes in the very tight, revealing clothing, but that's about it. That's why I use the phrase corporate media versus independent media. I don't use mainstream anymore, because if there's a mainstream, it's right here. We're the mainstream. We have the lion's share of the listeners and readers and audience. We're the mainstream. We're not the establishment, but we are the mainstream. Now then, time for your daily dose of booga booga booga. Can't keep a good, evil person down. Courtesy of Sight Intelligence, there is now a video saying that Osama bin Laden's son is getting ready to take revenge against the United States for killing his father in Abbottabad. Now, first of all, everything coming out of Sight Intelligence is pure propaganda. They've been caught faking some of these ISIS videos. And we know that whoever it was who was killed in Abbottabad was not the real Osama bin Laden, who died of natural causes in December of 2001. And every bin Laden since then, getting younger and younger and healthier looking, was a phony, was a fake. Now, Israel is demanding Barack Obama to stop all aircraft sales to the Gulf, claiming that this will put terrorists in warplanes aimed at Israel. Well, I thought Israel had this amazing defensive missile system and Air Force courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer. And apparently the House has just voted to block the Boeing sale of civilian passenger jets to Iran. This was a $25 billion deal. And Congress is willing to kneecap the Boeing company to please their masters in Tel Aviv. Apparently in southern Lebanon, a bunch of Israeli troops were caught rustling 450 goats. But they're terrorist goats. Don't you understand? They're terrorist goats. We have to steal them. Some parts of this country, rustling livestock is a hanging offense, or it used to be. Turning to the economy, as you know, there's been a lot of focus on Deutsche Bank and what trouble it might be in. And they've been saying, it's all fine, everything's wonderful, no need to worry. Today, they have flipped around. Italy's prime minister has been proven right, and Deutsche Bank's chief economist is saying that they need a 150 billion with a B euro bailout. Now, you all know what a bailout is, right? That's when the government takes $1 trillion from you, the people, and gives it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to you at interest. That's all a bailout is. We are hearing from France, things are getting very tense. Virtually no coverage. A lot of coverage of the Black Lives Matter protests here in the United States. France, virtually the entire nation, is now in the streets, and the head of the French police is saying France is on the brink of a civil war. Up in Berlin, major confrontation, civil unrest. 3,500 people are rioting against the police. This whole European Union idea is just falling apart. This globalist idea is falling apart. Now, apparently, reinsurer companies. Now, a reinsurer insures the insurance companies against excessive claims. And it's another layer in the economic structure that you may not be aware of. But they're starting to hoard cash and physical gold. They know what's coming as well. According to the Bureau of Labor Standards, in June, there were 94,517,000 Americans not in the labor force. So yes, let's open the borders and flood in illegal immigrants and refugees to further stress the job market against the American people. Retail store closings are at their highest level since 2010. Now, they're trying to blame this on the fact that a lot of people are doing their shopping online, and a lot of people are, because I don't know about where you are. Here in Hawaii, the retailers trying to save money and overhead, they don't have much of a selection anymore. You go in, and it's big piles of maybe 3 or 4 things that they hope you'll buy, and they figure you'll buy one of them. But the reality is, the consumer economy in this country was killed along with that middle class. Because if people are not able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, then they don't have anything to go into the shopping malls and buy stuff with. And nobody wants another credit card. Because the American people, by and large, have a high sense of responsibility. Unlike the U.S. federal government, they don't want to borrow money unless they know for a fact they can pay it back. The federal government will borrow money like crazy because it's not coming out of their pocket, and they figure just down the road they'll raise taxes on you again. But apparently, Japanese fast fashion darling Uniqlo has already closed 5 of its locations. Ralph Lauren, Macy's are shutting stores. Target's in serious trouble because of their restroom policy. They're going to start closing stores. Apparently there was another incident where a man went into the ladies' restroom saying he self-identified as a man. And he basically accosted a young girl there. And the girl's father came in and beat the man to a pulp saying, I self-identify as Rocky Balboa. All right, it's time for us to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates to rejoin our network. We're in hour number 3 here, and we're talking about the economy, and then we're going to get into some science news as well. So, interesting question. We keep seeing the stock market soaring into new heights. They've already overcome the dip from Brexit. It's out there and being used as a political banner. Look, the economy is great. The stock market is way, way up there. Well, it may be a sham because you're seeing these huge outflows of equity from the market. And in a normal, reasonable, unrigged market, stock prices should go as equity flees. So we're looking at this story in Investment Watch blog. How do you account for equity outflows as the stocks go higher? Well, because it's being rigged. This government lies about absolutely everything. You're literally living in a matrix of contrived illusions to keep you docile and happy and in your place. That's it. George Galloway is out there talking about the Chilcot report, saying that it is utterly damning and there is no road back. And no, there isn't. They can't put this genie back into the bottle. The Prime Minister's office is already out there trying to contain the damage. Apparently, all of Britain's top military officers have been issued with gag orders. They are forbidden to comment on the Chilcot report with anybody at all. Now, the Chilcot report confirms something we have been saying all along. What motivated the invasion of Iraq was oil profits. When the United Nations gave Iraq permission to sell their oil for the euro, Tony Blair and George W. Bush had a meeting in Texas at the Crawford Ranch, which Blair is now trying to deny happened. And at that point, the decision was made to invade Iraq and put Iraq's oil, chain it back to the U.S. dollar. And that's what it was all about, the money. That's what all your children were killed and crippled for or sent back home with PTSD and psychiatric medicine dependencies. That's why it was done. Oil money, oil profits. Now, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Great Britain, John Prescott, is saying there is no question the Iraq War was absolutely illegal. And it was. It was a war of conquest. It was a war for oil wealth. Now, a lot of people are very upset that the International Criminal Court in The Hague is saying we're going to look at some of the lower level people, but we refuse to bring charges against Tony Blair, just like the FBI was saying we refuse to bring charges against Hillary Clinton, even though we all know she's guilty as all get out. Because the elites are above the law. They're the nobility. You know, Lord Tony Blair and Lady Hillary, we can't charge them. But there's an interesting little article over at davidswanson.org saying that Blair could be prosecuted in a number of venues outside the International Criminal Court. And there is a lot of pressure from the public saying that somebody needs to be held to account for lying the nation into a war of conquest. And that applies here in the United States as well as to Great Britain. And we're seeing articles like this one that came out of ericmargolis.com. It's time to send our war criminals to The Hague. Because they are war criminals. They launched a war of invasion under false pretenses. They engaged in torture. This was an illegal war. Remember, in 2003, when George Bush sent the letter of transmittal to Congress, activating the authorization for the use of force, he lied in that letter of transmittal by claiming that Iraq was involved with 9/11 and that Iraq had banned weapons of mass destruction. Now, fraud negates consent. Those two lies in the letter of transmittal mean it was null and void. And Bush sent our country to war on the basis of these lies. And it's time for some of these people to be held to account for this. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, there is still a huge fury going on over the Brexit. There are all these editorials saying, well, really, the referendum isn't binding. Parliament should decide, and so forth and so on. And there's been a big fight over who's going to be the new Prime Minister of Great Britain. Cameron is actually going to resign Wednesday. Said it was going to be later in the year. Now he's changed his mind. He's going to resign Wednesday, following the departure of Andrea Leadsom from the race for Prime Minister. So now it's automatic. Theresa May will become the next Prime Minister of Great Britain, and she's firmly on board keeping Great Britain enslaved to the European Union. So there's been a lot of dirty back-channel politics going on to make sure that the Prime Minister of Britain is opposed to the Brexit. But they ought to take a look at what's going on in Germany, France, and even in the streets of the United States of America. People have been pushed to the breaking point. The next government edict that says, to heck with what you want, we're going to do what we want, could be the spark that starts another revolution. This push for a global dictatorship, a global private central bank, has created a political climate conducive to a global revolution, where all the people in all these nations bring down their oligarchs all at the same time. I think that would be a good thing. Because the money junkies are like a hydra. You kill one of them off, two more will grow and take its place. You've got to take out the heart, and the heart of the money junkies are private central banks issuing public currency as loan at interest. That has to be killed, or the hydra will come back. Now, regardless of whether Theresa May is going to be able to overturn the will of the British people and not have a revolution on her hands, Hungary has already set their date for their European Union referendum. It will be October 2nd on voting to leave. Now, on the side of the Brexit, as you know, there's been all this dire warnings and fear-mongering. Oh, without Europe, Britain will crumble. Britain will have nothing to deal with. You seem to forget the British Commonwealth of Nations still reaches around the globe to long-time allies and trading partners like Canada and Australia. Britain was never all that dependent on Europe in the first place. Britain has already opened up a yuan trading center in the London financial district. If they're cut off from the euro, Britain could shift over to the yuan, and that's going to be another blow against the U.S. dollar. China is looking at a free trade deal with Great Britain that will boost Britain's manufacturing. And because of the drop in the British pound post-Brexit vote, Britain's products are more attractive on the international marketplace. They could actually come out of this doing very, very well, certainly better than the rest of Europe that's still enslaved to that European Central Bank. And there's a lesson of history for all of you to pay attention to. Nations that are enslaved to private central banks cannot economically compete with nations that are not, because of that huge amount of wealth and work product siphoned off by the private central bankers for their own pleasure, to feed their own addiction. That's why anytime there is a nation that breaks free of a private central bank, immediately they will make war on that nation to bring them back into the servitude of the private central banks. That's why they engineered that war against the Nazis, because the Nazis got rid of the private central bank imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, and they issued a value-based currency, and Germany's economy lit up. It was called the German miracle. And people around the world were saying, wow, we got to copy their system, because it's working. It's working for the people. And the private central banker said, that will be enough of that. Same reason European nations backed the Confederacy during America's Civil War. Because of Lincoln's issuance of the greenback, the government furnishing its own money and refusing to borrow it at interest from a privately owned bank. That was a major, major threat. And the only reason those European countries were not able to supply the Confederacy to win the war And by the way, at one point, France and Britain actually considered invading the U.S. on the behalf of the Confederacy. The only reason they didn't is Russia was protecting the U.S. coasts. Little bit of Civil War history you probably never understood. Because Russia had just broken free of private central banking and adopted a system like Lincoln's. And they understood the real war was not against North and South or Europe and America. The real war was against public banking versus private central banking. And that is the heart of virtually every conflict for the last 3 centuries. Now, over in Germany, the German people are now demanding an EU referendum. They want out. Merkel's being told it's time to hold a Brussels vote. It's a huge amount of public outcry for this. The longer Merkel puts her foot down and stalls, the more arrogant and she's coming across. She's not going to survive her next re-election. Meanwhile, on the areas of immigration, the French riot police are in a battle with migrants in Calais. That's broken out into outright violence. The whole world's going crazy. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the immigration refugee crisis. Now, last week we mentioned that the Swedish police thought they could deal with this sexual assault problem that's come in with the refugee problem by giving out these little wristbands to women. The police are handing them out, do not grope. Well, apparently these are now considered trophies by the refugee rapists. They'll grab the girls that have these wristbands, and then when they're done with the girls, they take the wristbands with them. It's a trophy. It's a point of pride here. Let's see. We already talked about the protests in Germany that's going on. This whole New World Order globalism thing isn't working very well, is it? Unfortunately, people at that level of power are incapable of admitting they made a mistake, that a policy has failed. They're going to blame somebody else for it. Just like Hillary is now trying to drop the blame for the email server scandal onto ordinary staffers at the State Department. It's all your fault. You shouldn't have sent me that stuff in the first place. Where else were they going to send it? She wasn't using her State Department email account. All she had was the private server. Where else were they going to send it? But that's how politicians work. They'll take credit for anything good that happens, even if they had nothing to do with it. Anything bad that happens, it's some underling's fault. Now, there's a story over here at Russia Insider saying the elites are panicking over this revolt against their globalist agenda. The people of the world are on the march saying, no, we are not going to be part of your global herd of laborers and serfs. Now, end of this month, July 30th, is National Whistleblower Day, celebrating a more open and just society and recognizing the courage of whistleblowers. You know, like, Edward Snowden. Now, there's a bit of a diplomatic stink going on. Apparently, there was video footage of a Russian guard basically wrestling down an American diplomat before he could get into the U.S. embassy. He's been accused of being a spy. The U.S. has persona non grata to Russian diplomats in retaliation. But the question is, how did the Russians all of a sudden discover this guy was a CIA spy? Is Putin going to come on out there and say, well, we got his name from Hillary's emails? Wouldn't that be an absolute embarrassment? Confirmation that, yes, indeed, secrets from Hillary's server did get out, and they did result in the arrest of an American agent in place. Now, there's a new documentary coming on out on July 17th regarding TWA 800. It's actually been 17 years. How time flies when you're fighting corruption. And TopDocumentaryFilms.com has a detailed review of the film. The focal point of this documentary are 6 former investigators who were quoted as supporting the official story that there was no missile, it was a spark in the fuel tank. Now that they're retired, they're all blowing the whistle. They've gone public saying they were forced by the FBI to lie to you, the American people, about the true cause of the destruction of TWA 800. And of course, I have a very long, comprehensive article about that at my website, including the magic windbox theory, which we'll get into a little more toward the end of the week when we get closer to the anniversary of that shoot down. But you need to understand, it's not unique when you catch the government lying to you. It's not shocking. It's not a scandal. It's what they always do. It's what they always do. That's how they control you. Lies, fraud, and deception. Now, there's been a new revelation regarding the Fast and Furious gun walking program that was claimed to be using your money to give Mexican drug criminals guns. And it turns out there was a different agenda all along. We'll explain when we get back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about an article that appeared in AmericanPatriotDaily.com talking about how it turns out there was a different agenda for the Fast and Furious gun walking program. Now, the official story was that the U.S. government was going to spend your tax dollars to give Mexican drug criminals the very same kind of weapons the government insists you not be allowed to have. And the story was that they were going to somehow be able to track these guns into the Mexican drug cartel's hands, which is very easy to do when you're the one handing them in to them. But apparently, there was another agenda. The Obama administration was hoping all this flood of these assault-style weapons was going to be brought back across the border and be used to kill Americans to sell the idea of an assault weapons ban. And some of those weapons did come across the border, and they were used to kill Americans. And the whole scandal blew up. But they didn't come across the border in enough numbers. But that's really where we are. We, the American people, by and large, we're very well behaved. We're trying to play by all the rules, even when the rules are self-contradictory. So if Obama cannot find real Americans that are going to do what he needs to justify a gun grab, he gave guns to Mexican drug criminals with the intention that they bring them back to the U.S. and kill Americans so he could demonize assault rifles and have an assault weapons ban. It's all about gun control. It's another dirty trick. We don't have real Americans who are going on out and doing these things, so we're going to just manufacture our own. And again, go back and look at COINTELPRO. If there isn't a real enemy, make one up. Just like George Orwell's 1984. At this point, it's obvious. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are U.S. creations to scare you. Now, as far as Fast and Furious is concerned, it did not work. June gun sales crushed the previous record. The American people understand what's going on. They understand that all dictatorships want to disarm their population. And they're buying guns as fast as they can where they're still legal. Out in California, they're buying all kinds of gun components before the new laws go into effect. They're trying to grandfather all this stuff in. Now, nobody wants a bloody revolution in the streets of America. I certainly don't. But if the American people are armed to the teeth, it is a deterrent to the government trying to come on in and seize our gold, seize our silver, which we know they're talking about, and grab our kids for more wars of conquest. When the founders created that Second Amendment, they did not do it to cause a revolution in the streets of America. They did it to prevent one. by giving that central government a really good reason to mind its own business and leave the law-abiding citizen alone. It's the same rationale the United States had during the Cold War, building that huge nuclear arsenal. We have no intention of using it. We just want to discourage others from using them against us. And that is the same rationale for an armed American citizenry. We hope we will never have to use them. But as long as we have them, it acts as a hindrance on the government basically behaving the way the government has been. Now, Oliver Stone has a new film coming on out. It's called Ukraine on Fire. I cannot wait to see it. I have a huge amount of respect for Oliver Stone as a director, going all the way back to Platoon, and of course we all remember JFK. And this film basically goes on in and tells what really happened up in Kiev, where the legitimate government of Ukraine was overthrown because they did not want to merge with the European Union. They wanted to get closer to Russia. And so the U.S. did what it's been doing at least 50 times since the end of World War II. Go into a country, kick up civil unrest, cause the collapse of the democratic government, and put in a ruling junta in its place. That's what the U.S. has been doing. And they may be trying to do the same thing here in the United States of America. Now, we're getting an update from the riots in Berlin. Apparently, over 120 policemen were injured, 86 civilians arrested, but it's getting out of control over there. All right, turning to the world of science, I've been watching China's space program with a great deal of admiration and nostalgia from when I was with NASA, but it appears that China may have a bit of a problem with their space station, the Tiangong-1. Apparently last March, they lost radio contact with it. Apparently it does not have a crew at this moment, and it may be starting to deorbit. Now, China being China is not going to announce something is about to come crashing out of the sky until the last minute. I'm sure they're trying to figure out some way they can fix the situation, reestablish contact, maybe even get a pusher rocket up there, boost it into a higher orbit. There was actually, when Skylab was going through all of its problems and it was starting to have a decay in the orbit, they were thinking about going up to Skylab and strapping a rocket on that. But because of the Challenger disaster, they weren't able to get up there in time. So, I wish them luck. We actually had something fall out of orbit over Maui about 2 months ago. Came down at nighttime. It was absolutely spectacular. Now, there's an article over Investment Watch blog. Again, 97% of climate scientists agree that man-made catastrophic climate change is real. Debunked. Now, the New York Times bestselling author Alex Epstein, founder of the Center for Industrial Progress, has done a study. And we've seen similar studies done before, where this idea that 97% of climate scientists have signed on with human-caused global warming. First of all, most of the names on that list are not actually climate scientists. Many of the names on that list have been denied by those people saying, I never signed on to this. I don't know where they got my name and why it's there. Well, because they just wanted to load it up and say, believe us because we're scientists. They're still trying to salvage this human-caused global warming idea because they need a carbon tax. They're out of money. They did not get the windfall of cash they thought they were going to get from Obamacare. They're desperate for money, but apparently not desperate enough to allow a RICO lawsuit against that Clinton Foundation, because the billions hiding in there would certainly close some budget shortfalls in the government. But that money belongs to the ruling class. We're not allowed to touch that. We only work with money we take from you serfs and you slaves and you working people. Meanwhile, as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's snowing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Now, it has snowed in Wyoming in July in the past. It's not as unique as when we had snow down here on the Big Island. But it's still very unusual. And when you go back and look at all these global warming climate experts back in 2000 were insisting snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Very clearly they were wrong. But this isn't science. It's politics. It's agenda. It's getting that carbon tax. It's tricking you into submission to a global environmental authority that will tell you that to save Mother Earth, you need to live in a converted cargo container. And by the way, that propaganda is all over the TV. I'm catching these TV shows about the new trend in micro homes, where basically they take a closet and they put a window and a bed in it and say, see, isn't this just the greatest way to live? No, it isn't. It's a serf's hut. It's a slave hut, is what they're trying to sell you as the new fashion trend. Now, up in France, there is this tycoon who's tied in very tightly with Benjamin Netanyahu. Ahmed Mimran was convicted of fraud last Thursday, got an 8-year sentence and a €1 million fine for the 2008-2009 fraud, which was so massive it caused a tax shortfall for the French government. And it was a €283 million scam in the trade and taxation of carbon emission permits. This carbon trading is a fraud. They keep getting exposed as frauds. Now, we understand Israel's Attorney General has opened up an investigation into Benjamin Netanyahu over something related to corruption. And Netanyahu would certainly not be the first Israeli prime minister to be brought up on such charges. Interesting little story from CBC. Antivirus software is increasingly useless and actually may make your computer less safe. I remember when Peter Norton sold the Norton Utilities to another company and they came out with the new Norton antivirus, and experts looked at it and said, you know, this thing actually opens up more security holes than it closes. And on that topic, I would like to share with you something that happened at Claire's church yesterday. And because there was somebody there that we needed to talk to, I accompanied Claire to her church, and we're sitting there, and all of the media support is misbehaving, it's whatever. And finally, in the middle of the sermon, I'm not kidding you, the pastor stops and says, does everybody here agree with me that Windows 10 is from the devil? And of course, the church just erupted in applause and shouting, and it was just so much amusement there. And of course, afterwards, we talked about the terrible experience we had with Windows 10 and how it literally destroyed the first choir support laptop for Claire's choir. We never got it all the way back, and finally, I tossed it. And thanks to the generosity of one of the listeners to this show, we got a replacement laptop, which is now the new choir support laptop. But Windows 10 is an absolute disaster. But when you live in a fascist economic dictatorship, you're not allowed to buy what you want to buy. You will buy what the corporations are going to sell you. GMO food, mandatory vaccines. You're not allowed to have any choice whatsoever. Now, the main reason for the push to Windows 10 is, in addition to increased spying on you and increased protection of intellectual property rights, is the entire software industry is trying to transition away from perpetual licenses to monthly rentals. And in a healthy economy, maybe. In this economy, no. Because if you're in, let's just take my former business, computer animation, and you buy the computer and you buy a license to an animation system, and when you work, and when you don't work, you shut it all down, you go away. But if you're required to pay monthly payments on the software, and you hit a dry spell, and your licenses expire, you're out of business. You can't restart. When somebody knocks on the door and says, we've got a perfect project for you and it's got a lot of money, nothing happens when you turn on the computer. You're absolutely stuck. But when you live in a neo-feudalist society, you're not allowed to own anything. It's always going to be a rental. And the advantage for the software companies here is they don't have to spend any money coming up with newer and better products to get your money. Your money is flowing to them automatically month after month, week after week, year after year after year after year. They have no more incentive to produce anything that's any better. They don't need to. That means a lot of programmers are going to be let go because it's just going to be a rental house from now on. And every time Microsoft comes out with a new operating system, it's always much more bloated, much more complicated, much more openings for the cyber criminals to get in. And that's another reason why this other article was saying most antivirus software, it's increasingly useless. Now, computers have become an indispensable part of our national economy. Cybercrime has become a serious problem. Ransomware has literally shut down hospital patient record systems, potentially endangering the patients when the doctors can't find what the records are. And by the way, Obamacare mandated computerization of hospital records. Those old paper records, those went away. Because when a doctor commits malpractice, that paper record becomes valid in the court of law. But if you've got a computerized record, you can go in and edit it. No, we didn't make a mistake. See, the computer wouldn't lie to you. But we've created a system which is as big a threat to our economic survival as anything coming out of Russia or China, the ruble or the yuan. When the U.S. government indemnified the computer industry against product liability, they created a situation that led to faulty hardware, flawed software, loss of productivity. And it has become a curse on our society and our economy. And that needs to stop. When you buy a car, and because of a design error, it crashes and you suffer financial harm, you're allowed to sue the car maker. If you buy a computerized accounting system for your business, and because of a design flaw, it crashes, wipes out all your data, and you suffer financial harm, you're not allowed to sue. You really ought to read that end-user license agreement that comes with your operating system and your software. You might be shocked what's in there. South Park actually did a very funny show on that, about the end-user license agreement for Apple and what people were agreeing to when they broke that wrapper. But if we have computers as critical infrastructure, there ought to be some mechanism for guaranteeing that it's going to work as advertised, that it's going to be there when it's needed. But you don't get that. These days it's all about whatever makes money is good and whatever doesn't make money is bad. And that's just where we're stuck here. All right, let's pick up a few more headlines here as we head into the end of the show. Let's see. Apparently down in Venezuela, we haven't talked about Venezuela for a while, they're now starting to eat stray dogs and cats. Pets are winding up in cooking pots. And we need to pay attention to that, because when things start to unravel here, we're going to see the same thing. How will you find out who the preppers are? They're the ones not eating out of the trash dumpsters. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Monday. And John Rappaport has an article out, Casting Call for Extras Actors During Cleveland RNC Violence. And I think we can add to that also the Democratic Convention as well. The timing seems very convenient for this massive social unrest. And obviously the Republican National Convention is going to be a target for disruption on this claim that Donald Trump is racist and anti-woman. And Donald Trump was never called either one of those things until he started running for office. And Rappaport is making a valid point. This does feel all engineered. And we do know that there are companies that actually stage protests, even riots, come up with crowds for political rallies for the media cameras to consume. Now, one of the theories that's been floating around about why all of a sudden Black Lives Matter is on the warpath against police is to cause a ruckus that would cause both conventions to have to be shut down. That could conceivably put the November elections on hold. Now, I know every second-term president dreams of finding a way around that 25th Amendment, but there have been more than a few articles about how most Democrats want a third Obama term. It wouldn't be that bad an idea. They're already trying to sell this idea. As I said before, go back and look at the way the United States has overthrown democracies in other parts of the world. Cause civil unrest, destabilize, bring down the democratic government, install a ruling junta that is unelected, unimpeachable, serving the interests of the global tyrants and the money junkies. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973, Ukraine in 2014. Been trying to do it in Syria for the last 5 years. This is a repeating pattern. And there is no rule that says they can't do the same thing here in the United States of America. Create a social crisis that allows the temporary suspension of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which would then become permanent. We've already seen the utter disdain for democracy and due process and the voters coming out of both party machines and the White House. We've seen all these articles about how we suffer from too much democracy. Really? Remember how George Bush used to joke this would be so much easier if this was a dictatorship? As long as I'm the dictator, They tipped their hands. They've been thinking about this a long time. How to get rid of this pesky Constitution and Bill of Rights. How to reduce the American people down to the status of slaves so they can go on with their dreams of world conquest. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, share what you know with everybody that you know. Grab the graphics, flood the social media. Everybody who's out there supporting the violence for Black Lives Matter is either an undercover informant or they're a useful idiot. Take your pick. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.